Drug use was not limited to ordinary folks or soldiers. It reached all the way up to the very top. Hermann Göring, the chief of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was a notorious morphine addict. And of course, even Hitler, who was otherwise, as you said, he didn't drink booze, he was a vegetarian, presented himself as a celibate man almost. And as far as we know, didn't have any previous experience with drugs. He himself became, should we say, infatuated with or even addicted to drugs. But maybe let's spend a moment talking about the man who introduced these substances to him first, his personal doctor, Theo Morell. Who was he?
Morell was an overweight, uh, avant-gardistic VIP doctor in Berlin in the 30s, and he had a somewhat well-going practice on the main boulevard of Berlin, attracting wealthy patients that basically had no disease but wanted to feel better, or actresses would go to this guy before they had to go on stage, and he would give them mood enhancing medicines. So he was kind of a Dr. Feelgood, not really a quack, but not really a serious doctor. So he was kind of an unusual guy at the time, because there were not these doctors that then became quite fashionable. For example, in the United States in the 50s and 60s, were not so this kind of doctoring was not so known at the time. But Morell was this kind of a doctor. So and he believed in vitamins. He was a vitamin specialist, and vitamins also were not known really at the time. So he would give his patients injections of vitamin C, for example, intravenous injections of vitamin C or other vitamins. And these injections actually led to a boost in the mood, or in also in performance. And he treated one man called Hoffmann, who was the photographer of Hitler. And Hoffmann thought that this is a great guy, and then introduced Hitler and Morell to each other. And Hitler had suffered for years from stomach cramps. This was in 1936 when they met for the first time. And Morell then gave Hitler his first injections, and Hitler loved these injections, and quickly appointed Morell as his personal physician, and then in a way became addicted to these almost daily injections. So Morell gave Hitler thousands of injections in the course of the 9 years that they spent together. They became good friends, and Morell was probably the man that Hitler talked to or consulted with the most. Many people were in the higher echelon of the Nazi regime were very suspicious of this guy because he was, a bit weird or a bit unusual. And he was around Hitler all the time, and he gave him these vitamin injections all the time. So in the beginning, he didn't give Hitler hardcore drugs, but he gave him vitamins, and this actually helped Hitler's health for quite a while. He never became ill. He was always in good shape, and his belief in his doctor was basically limitless.
When did he start to add a little bit more than just vitamins to Hitler's injections? And what were these substances?
This started in August 1941. This was the first time that Hitler became ill since he met Morell. So in the first time he became ill in 5 years. He had the so-called Russian flu, which is basically a very severe flu, which made him stay in bed in a critical phase of the campaign against the Soviet Union. So he couldn't go to the military briefing, and Hitler was very skeptical always of his generals. He always thought that they make bad decisions. So he he asked Morell to give him something stronger than vitamins so he could attend the daily military briefing. And for the first time, then Morell gives him more than just vitamins. He gives him Dolantin, which is an opioid, a German a brand made by a German company. And he injects this opioid into Hitler, and Hitler immediately feels better because these opioids are very strong, act very strong, very powerful agents. So Hitler could actually go to the military briefing. He was quite impressed by this medicine and asks for it more and more often until in 1943 he receives for the first time an even stronger opioid, which was called Oikodal, which is today known as oxycodone, which is the very opioid that created the opioid crisis in the United States. So this had been a German product before the end of the war. And Hitler really gets addicted to this Oikodal opioid in 1944 and uses it in quite high quantities, 20 milligrams per injection, during some phases of the war every second day. So that's very typical behavior of an addict, basically.
Did it stop there, or did Hitler start receiving even more potent drugs even more regularly? How did this addiction then spiral?
Oikodal is the most potent drug you can take. I mean, if you inject 20 milligrams intravenously of Oikodal, then you experience the strongest high that you can imagine. It's a stronger high than heroin. So this
Oh my
was
God.
this was already a peak experience for Hitler. Um, but he also took, he then became, he started liking potent substances, and he also consumed other things like
I bet he did.
hormone. Morell was very experimental with substances, and he gave Hitler quite a lot of hormone injections, which he thought, and Hitler thought as well, that they would boost his immune system, even though they did actually the opposite. Um, then there was a time in after the bomb attack against Hitler on July 20th, 1944, which left Hitler quite injured. His eardrums were blown, and he had received many wood splinters into his body. And after that, that attack by Stauffenberg on July 20th, 1944, the so-called Operation Valkyrie, Hitler started using also cocaine for until October. So from end of July till October, he regularly consumed cocaine against the pain in his ears, and so he became basically polytoxic, manic drug user, and he loved to experiment with all kinds of things. But Oikodal, the very potent opioid, stayed his favorite drug until the end.
So basically, he was receiving oxy and cocaine, what, on a daily basis or every second day, or?
After the Operation Valkyrie, he received cocaine on a daily basis, and then oxy every other day. So that was a pretty, drug intense phase of the dictator's life. It was basically what later was called speedball. If you consume an upper, which is cocaine, and a downer, which is an opioid, at the same time, you have like very strong drug experience. So Hitler basically removed himself more and more from reality and moved into artificial worlds where his mood was still somehow intact despite the catastrophic, news that he received from his generals from the front.
I mean, it's kind of mental that because Hitler was a bit gassy in the beginning, he ended up becoming basically a full blown drug addict. Oi! Thank you for listening to the episode. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe and follow on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. As always, eternal glory and gratitude to my producers who are supporting this show on Patreon, the kings and queens Gordan, Jurechuk, Lorenzo, Veronica, Mila, Carmen, and Taichi. Without you, this pod would not have been possible at all. If you'd like to become a certified Tovarish or Tovarishica of the show too, head to Patreon, find Smart Cookies podcast on there, and become one. It's as simple as that. Thank you.